Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to this session. I'll just do a quick overview of what we're going to cover and how it will work, and then we'll dive in. So we'll have two presentations, and then we will go into Q&A, and I'll do brief introductions. But I'll say briefly before I introduce first guest is part of the reason I wanted to invite our guest today is because I think this space is doing a lot of, is angling towards physical space. I think even actually in the crowd here, we have people who are doing projects in Indonesia and exploring other places. And I think what Shadja and Alicia bring to the table here is a wealth of experience in a range of it, from major architecture projects to on the ground. How do you think about decentralizing construction? And so I think they bring a seriousness to the space that is very helpful for people in places like Edge City that are increasingly exploring with more serious how to build these things. And the communities here, they have a lot of talent and skill and access to capital and a lot of sort of earnest energy towards doing this sort of thing. And I think it's just a good combination to unite these two groups for longer term. So that is the reasoning for this. So we will start off with our first presentation. So this is Alicia, who's the founder of the Circular Factory, who if anyone, I'm sure there are people here who have been to Prospera. The Circular Factory is in Prospera, Roatan, Honduras. Is the robot arm, if you have been there, or the pizza place. I think there's kind of a bar pizza place outside of it. And also founder of the MI Toolbox and an associate professor at the University of Calgary. So without further ado, please present, welcome Alicia.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Shams, and for the invitation to present at this HCT. A bit sad we couldn't make it in the real life. I have been, my background is in architecture, so I have been working in the architecture industry. I'm an architect by training for 20 plus years, and with a keen interest in how can we bring these digital designs or designs that are maybe a high ambition architecture, more inspiring into traditional construction methods. And with that, I kind of studied at and from Mexico, studied at the Architectural Association in London, and then work at Hadid, and then work at Populous, and always looking at this kind of high ambition architecture. Within that context, we built a lot of physical prototypes in Mexico City, but also in Brazil, also in other countries now, currently in Canada. And I started to look into robotic arms. So I'm a self-trained kind of roboticist, working with robots for the last 15 years, because I did realize that there was a gap into how we can translate this geometry when it's complex, when it's inspiring, when it's a bit beyond just a straight forms, into the real life. There is a lack or a missing point between physical and digital, and how can we translate the digital so it can be understandable by humans on the physical space. And that's when I started to work into, I work with robots and robotics. And reality is that a lot of the inspiration from behind we are doing is to kind of see how other industries, like the car industry, aesthetics are changing, how things look is more related to more new looks, more modern technologies, and more related to how they are built. Whereas in the built environment, we are just kind of really simplifying a lot. Things look a lot maybe more boring or less interesting than they used to look in the past, when actually we know that it was as expensive to build before that it is as expensive to build now. So what is going on and how can we close this gap? And we know that kind of AI gives us a lot of great ideas. A lot of the AI designs also are super inspiring, are really nice, but how can we get into build them and how can we actually make them happen, especially in a decentralized ways? So we also know that our interest with robots is because technology has become a lot more accessible. Robot arms are tools that are kind of a very low entry point, but also they are very flexible, almost like our hand. Whatever you can touch in your hand, whatever tool you can touch with your arm, a robot will be able to do it. So as a machine to start in a decentralized way is really effective because it's with the same machine, you can do multiple processes. And that was where really it started to attract us to say, how can we have a manufacturing production based mostly in robot arms as opposed to larger machines? And we know that the construction industry for a long time has been looking at a DFMA or design for manufacturing and assembly, a paradigm that emerged in the 80s as the future of construction, or as something that we still consider the future of construction. And in the DFMI paradigm, we are building inside factories that are large factories, in which buildings are manufactured in series and then transported on site to different sites. However, this represents many challenges. Mainly the challenges that we need these large machines that require from very large spaces, from production facilities that are not like how construction normally works, also require a large capital investment, and the skills for a person to work in manufacturing are very different from the skills for a person that works in construction, which basically means that construction skills are getting lost, and we are kind of trying to find people that works in a totally different space. So the SMEs, all the traditional crafts, all the traditional construction skills kind of get lost in the translation, while our buildings also lose a lot of what makes them be unique and custom. So we started to work on this paradigm and say, how can we move into a paradigm of design for robot factoring, where we can have flexible robotic cells that can robot factor high quality products in a more human compatible, decentralized way. So that's how we started to work in this area. How we started to get really interested in to see, okay, do we have these big machines? Can we actually bring them on site? Can we actually bring them near site in a more kind of decentralized cells that could exist outside the large idea of the factory? And actually, when we think about it, buildings are not normally transported around the same way that cars are. Buildings are built on where they are, right? So can these factories be near site where they are being produced, and also where maybe the skill sets are, the carpenters, the architects, the engineers, but also the tradespeople, and also the materials. When we think about prefabricated design on factories, we require from very established centralized supply chains that require just-in-time manufacturing, whereas normal construction will use materials that are on site, whatever you find, whatever species, whatever product. So how can we bring the advantages of digital fabrication, of precision manufacturing to our on-site context, and of course engage with local economies and engage with local trades? And that kind of we started to work on this project more than 10 years ago, and of course the centralized is using robots as a flexible machine that could bring everything together. We also developed these cyber physical platforms, kind of trying to think about how design for robot factoring should also be able to engage with user choice. So for example, this is some of the initial tests we did for a simple facade. How can we make it into an environment where there are many choices, where it could be customized, but also where people can be, the user can be receiving feedback into energy, radiation, sky view, exposure, material use, material cost, manufacturing times, the same as when you kind of buy something on the supermarket, you can see the nutritional contents. So can we see the label of the structure of our design decisions? How much do they actually cost in materials, in manufacturing, in times, and also energy, mass, etc. Of course, we develop all the backend for this platform where all the calculations get made to be able to be communicated in real time, or communicated as the user kind of make choices. So we started to develop also these kind of platforms that could enable a more transparency between the stakeholders and a more participatory way into how things are not only designed, the decisions are made by customers, by investors, by stakeholders, and also come to the production floor into the microfactory. And then this is kind of some prototypes built using this platform. And also we also kind of have looking at machine learning into how can we start to understand materials that may be heterogeneous, how can we use these platforms to understand where are knots, where the wood has imperfections, especially when we are looking at local supply chains that maybe materials are not so processed, so advanced as maybe more established production lines. So we can, how can we set our templates, how can we produce things to be sure that we don't have inconsistencies, that we don't have any milling problems, any manufacturing problems. So kind of also using that to also look at how we train our own kind of neural nets to know how to mill when material is not so perfect, or when we are kind of adapting to local materials. So basically, and these are some of those ideas of using different materials, and also kind of using these tools for milling and producing kind of high ambition or sophisticated architecture. And so that was the same ideas that we came when we started the Circular Factory in Prospera, like now 5 years ago, kind of thinking also the more local materials you use, the better you can promote local economies and build local knowledge. So this is a phrase from Francis Kere that really appreciate and kind of drives, we really find inspiration for a lot of the things we do and how we can also make the people proud that build and that live on the areas where we are kind of setting up these micro factories. So the idea was to leverage technology in order to create a sophisticated, dynamic, and customizable process, and also use technology as a tool of social innovation to bring those skills of manufacturing, of production into local trades and local workers. So the beginnings of Circular Factory was based on the Bayaboo project by Zaha Hadid Architects that is going to be built in Prospera. Some of the characteristics of this project, other than being like really beautiful, is that actually enables a large amount of customization. So every user can customize their unit. And this, of course, being designed by Zaha Hadid, it has like a really custom shapes that are inspirational, but are also very, very ambitious and really complex to do. So we designed the Circular Factory with the idea of having a flexible unit that could create all of these different pieces in a customizable, flexible way without requiring high investment, without requiring more machines, but actually being able to have everything into a consolidated and compact footprint. And this is the ginormous and a really exciting kit of parts that project has for the different customers and buyers. So based on that, we kind of were looking at this like start to set up with a kind of local certified forest, really looking at the raw materials that we find, and with all the international experience, detailed information that we bring, kind of establish this factory, this micro factory, to create a kit of parts. And to kind of really like a nearshore the fabrication. So we look at the project, we started to look at different ways, for example, existing cranes, telehandlers on site, not only the fabrication, but also all the existing tools that already are there. Like we know that we don't have access to high cranes. So really making all the sizes, all the dimensions of the pieces adapted to the local economy where they are going to be produced, and that it could be also moved on site. So from the mega factory to the micro factory on site or near site. So we designed this factory, really compact footprint. If any of you have been to Prospera, you have seen it, where we kind of have all the machines, the storage, also the carpentry areas, and the module finishing, pickup, and the main assembly. The core of the factory are 2 robot arms on a truck, which enable us to produce large beams and also like smaller sizes, everything based on the dimensions, not of the factory, but of what could be transported on site with the local telehandlers, which are basically small machines. They cannot carry more than 2 tons. So we know that we cannot have any component that will be heavier than that compared to larger factories. Then also we have scanning and the machine learning to be able to understand the deviations on the machine, on the digital, on the physical pieces. All of our wood is sourced on site, near site. All of it is Honduran timber, and also having all of our staff kind of continue to getting updated with their simulation files and all of the different processes. So we developed this digital workflow that goes from design, management, fabrication. Everything is transparent. The idea is that every stakeholder can access the platform, can see what is going on and can see what are the different processes that are happening throughout production, as well as all of our factory staff. Everything is all the machines are linked together, integrated in the software platform. From the early design, everything gets kind of transferred into the microfactory. Our staff, they have tablets where they can access what they are going to pre-produce. If there are any errors, mistakes on the files, we can also be constantly updating and looking at what is going on. And so that's how we kind of started from this design. This is the design from the architects, for example, the mesh that we received. And now through our digital platform, we kind of divide these, as I mentioned before, into pieces that could be transported on site, that could be made on site. And then each of these pieces has a different fabrication process depending on how they see it, on what kind of a grain direction, what kind of wood is going to be used, how the lamination will be done. For those ones, all of this project is using timber, a local timber, and then kind of each of these pieces has like a different fabrication process. For example, in this case, they get first cut on a CNC machine, a numerical machine. Then they get cut. they get laminated and they get assembled again, and then finally they get milled with the robot arms. So each of the piece has its own process, and all of this is controlled throughout the platform as it gets updated and as process gets fabricated. So here is the second lamination process before the final robotic milling to get that shape, and also kind of trying to look for material efficiencies, material saving, and the most like the kind of the best nesting process for each of these complex geometry pieces. Really inspirational. The platform has like all the different machines that we have on the shop, so all of our different stations where kind of the personnel, also the management, but also the personnel can access to see what is the bill of materials, what is the stock that they need, how much do they need, what are they going to be producing today, and then we can also constantly be updating into the what has been produced, where there were errors, where things are being changed. For example, in this case, also we can access like a bill of materials from very early on, so kind of see, okay, where is that piece, where on the project does it go, what is the different to which unit does it correspond, and then what are the different, not only wood, but also adhesive, brackets, dowels, and then the different processes. And we know that this piece will require from planar, from the jointer, then lamination, and not only machine time, but also human time, unsupervised time, which basically corresponds to gluing or whenever it is kind of drying, and whereas there are errors on the process. So we developed this platform with an aim of flexibility and also of kind of providing the maximum transparency throughout the fabrication process for every single piece that you can see, and to all of our different machines that are on the microfactory, and where you can see where the piece is, part of the process, whereas it is finished, how much is missing, or where there were any errors, and what is the different schedules. So that's our digital platform. And then this is how the physical factory is in Ratán. So we have the two robot arms. That's a Jaime, one of our master carpenters. And also we have the two CNC machines, a planer, a jointer, and all of the other kind of more traditional carpentry machines that you will find. Right now we have upskilled more than 22 local workers that they have become aware of how to use robotics, how to use digital processes, and potentially kind of really bring all the trades into this digitized economy, making them active participants of digital tools and digital processes, and also excited about what they are doing. We fabricated a part of that Bella Book project for the Venice Biennale in 2023, which was exhibited there on the Palazzo Mora. And these are the pieces right now, the Zaha Hadid Gallery in London exhibited. We also have used the same setup to use more like look at a raw material, like raw lumber, for example. This is a pavilion. So using the same setup and the same digital platform, like a pavilion that we did, actually kind of trying to go one layer deeper to look at the local lumber. How can the local lumber be used like without any process, before any pre-processing is done? So actually scanning the logs and then using them to process with the same, as I mentioned, the robot in this case has a circular blade, also has the milling, the spindle, so same machine, a lot of different processes. So this was a raw lumber pavilion that is also outside the Vita building in a Prospera. And here you can see this is all kind of using logs. Also, we have done, like if you have like this on the Duna Tower, we also fabricated all the louvers for the tower. With the same setup, you can see the same platform, but a different project. So really kind of the main ambition was this flexibility and not only a single process. And right now we are doing these Tiracent cabins. We have fabricated one. They are glamping cabins, are going to be on the Veta Village, which are kind of a single 50 square meter dwellings, single with like one bedroom, bathroom, like a studies, like a little nook and a kitchen. They are all done of like local timber, raw timber. Again, like similar, these are the facade is all kind of louvers that kind of start to open up to kind of show the different processes. And here the robot kind of milling, not only the internal frames, everything is frames, but also all of the exterior pieces that create the facade. So these are the glamping cabins. These are all like the different frame panels. Everything is a timber system assembled on site. As I mentioned, these are the machines that we have there. All got assembled on site, prefabricated. It all fits in a single container. So it's transported to the site. This is near the beach, near the Pristine Bay. And then this is the finalized cabin that we are doing now. So the setup on the factory is now into these. These are some photos of the interiors of the Tiracent cabins. So basically, the idea is to create this decentralized, distributed, democratic fabrication through a flexible and adaptable microfactory with a software that enables stakeholder participation and also kind of micro-credential, upskilling, training the locals. Yeah, thank you very much. I will stop my sharing.
Thank you so much, Alicia. One thing I'll mention as well, I actually did some research on the ground in Prospera and interviewed one of the Circular Factory team members, Jean. And one thing that struck me is I went in there thinking like it would be a lot of conversation about the technology in there. But actually what he seemed most passionate about was training people there, upskilling people there. And he had spent multiple years at that point there helping train people to use the machine to do the carpentry. So I think that's quite a fascinating aspect of it. Okay, Shajay, are you ready to share screen?
Yep.
Okay, I'll introduce Shajay as he's doing that. So Shajay is the head of Computation Design Research Group at ZHA, also known as Zaha Hadid Architects. And you can take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Chance, for the invitation. And like Alicia, I'm sorry we couldn't be there in person. Looking forward to more conversations. I'm going to talk about like the kind of digital side or the flip side of design to what Alicia spoke about, which is on the manufacturing side.
Shajay, sorry. Do you have slides?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sharing it. Are you seeing it or no?
I don't see it.
Okay, let me share entire screen. Oh, there we go. Oh, now you see it, right?
Oh, yeah, there it was.
Is that working?
Yeah, now it's there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the design side of things with a similar ambition, of how we can design for these upcoming startup communities and eventually which can blossom into cities. So I work for the design research team, which I co-founded almost 20 years ago at Zaha Hadid Architects. The company is obviously known for these more high-tech buildings globally, and the company is about 50 years old, but we have operated in every possible economy as it was emerging. So whether it's like the Middle East or China or now India and so on. So in that sense, we have been following in the kind of footsteps of the Bauhaus. That's what I'm going to talk about, not the architecture of the company, but the kind of efforts in scaling up design-led ideas. Bauhaus, as many of you might know, was a kind of short-lived but deeply impactful art and architecture movement in between the two wars, where they were exploring new forms of knowledge and new forms of making, and to kind of postulate a new architecture on that basis, which led to a prolific number of new buildings being built after the Second World War, especially in Europe and North America, and which then led to deep impact on our everyday buildings, so-called commodity buildings globally, and also how 20th century cities took shape. So we kind of want to follow in a similar footstep, but not repeat the mistakes of the 20th century, but to learn from the positive things that they did, which was focus on research and development and demonstration, and then later helping percolate those innovations and technologies deeper into the industry and into everyday buildings and cities. As many of you know, venture capital in the architecture industry is almost non-existent. So all innovation is in a way funded by these kind of iconic projects. That's not only true for 20th century, but also historically, cathedrals were the engines of innovation in Renaissance Europe, and similarly temples and other religious buildings in other parts of the world. So all of this, in the last 50 years, we've been exploring technological counterparts to this architectural and urban ambition. And we have seen 4 specific kind of episodes. Like one relates to computational geometry, how we can digitally design shapes on the computer, and how we can then produce them physically using digital means. And later we've been looking at like so-called video games and or game theoretic games for consensus building among stakeholders, and which we now also investigating how that leads further on to so-called AI for new cities. So today I'm going to talk only about like point 3, which is use of games for consensus building or participatory architecture and participatory design. But just a bit of a precursor, like why are interested in cities? Like as an architect, as a designer, as an urbanist, it's deeply rewarding to see that like our outcome of our profession can really help civilizations blossom and deeply impact all the citizens of the world. So it is kind of preaching to the choir here, like to say that there's a deep relationship between urbanization and GDP growth. And you can see that it's almost like a linear correlation between GDP. The more urbanized you get, like the more higher the GDP. But what's perhaps less known is that there is a design component to this. Like there's an architectural component, there's an urban design component, which we can see when we compare New York with London. So New York like kind of has similar population to London, but it's almost like 4 times or at least 3 times the GDP. And more importantly, it's 4 times the GDP per square kilometer. And so this, and also New York grew very quickly in the 20th century, like to have become a financial and cultural capital of the world. And so we believe that this is generally because like of a well-planned and executed and well-deliberated urban design and architectural system, which then became a kind of exportable, prosperity-enhancing innovation, like how to build these kind of cities. What did New York figure out? They figured out zoning and so-called air rights, like which is now like infamous in a way, but this was one of the innovations from the kind of commissioner's plan of the 18th century and which was revised again in the 19th century. And we all know about the famous Central Park and urban design elements like that. And then most importantly, they designed these kind of templates for building types, like whether it's skyscrapers or the 6 or 7 residential building types that they had pre-approved, and which is now dotted all over New York, right? And so the gridiron system of like New York also makes like the real estate development really, really easy because the plots are fungible. So these designs are equally applicable on the east side or the west side, like because the plots are identical, almost identical. And so the developers don't have to get like new permissions every time. So these were some of the reasons why New York really kind of figured it out, and these integrations between urban planning, urban design, and architectural design led to a lot of prosperity in a short time. And so that's like what we think cities are a more kind of recent architectural invention, cities that grow that rapidly. And since then, like US has not tried it again, but China has definitely copied a lot of things, successes from the United States, leading to almost like 100+ cities in a matter of like 50 years between 1980 till now. Shenzhen being one of the most important examples of that. And so this architectural invention, in a way, like can deeply affect citizens of the world. Cities, as we know, cover only 1% of the surface area of the Earth, account for 80% of the wealth and 70% of the pollution and so on. So it is very challenging, and it can be deeply rewarding as well. So that's why we are very motivated in this kind of integrated system development. So games for consensus falls under that, because we have figured out, or we've been working collaboratively with architects and engineers and scientists and so on for the other aspects. But one of the things that deeply interests me is ideas of games, game theoretic setups for consensus building or incentive mechanisms and so on. This was early on explored by Patrick Schumacher, who's a a principal at Zadid Architects in the year around 2000. There was a postgraduate design student-led team called RAMTB that released this book called Negotiate My Boundary. And two things that they spoke about in this book was deeply impactful to what Alicia and I, tried since 2016. One of those aspects was this online community building. This was well before Facebook, well before any such thing existed, that people quickly figured out that the internet could actually help bring communities online together and like kind of look for synergies between various people and their interests and so on, and how we could then potentially physically host them through technologies of mass customization like modular construction and so on, like all the things that Alicia already spoke about. So these two aspects, like how do you combine online community formation with like corresponding physical hosting on land hosting aspects. So those are what like Alicia and I like picked up in our kind of teaching activities at the Architectural Association in London since 2016, titled Constructing Social Agency. And then we started leveraging emerging technologies of video games to kind of help non-architects, non-designers to visualize like the possibilities of combinations of spaces and how we can create communities and give them what they want rather than them buying things and then figuring out like the building as built is not what they originally intended. So since then, we've been thinking about these kind of configurator systems, like for configuring spaces in a kind of collaborative, community-led way. So this is the context in which we kind of arrived at the Beabu pilot project in Roatan, where we proposed as Zadid Architects this kind of design, modular design, but still customized to the individual occupants of the building. And so like the red dot there is like the kind of pilot cluster, like, but the intention was to demonstrate like through that pilot cluster, like all these technologies. And if it was successfully demonstrated, we could then plan out like the rest of the kind of development. So we proposed two separate technologies in this kind of online to on-land tech stack. One was the configurator on the left, like, and the other was Circular Factory. And we built the configurator as internal to ZHA, and Circular Factory was commissioned by the client, and Alicia has since taken it forward. So on the configurator side, like we built this kind of game engine based configurator where people could log in on the browser and select their site, like pieces of land in 3D, and then later customize the interior layout of the building, like a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, or two office space, etc. And then also walk around real time, like, and see what they can see from inside their house, like how much of the ocean they can see, who their neighbors are, and so on. So this was like a kind of very well received by like non-architect buyers and eventual occupants of the building. So, and this was like well before anything was built on site, right? Like, and currently this has not been built, even though it has been now designed and engineered to a great amount of detail. So, and behind the scenes, like there were these ideas of 3D rights, like coming from Air Rights in New York, but like extended to 3D, where the users only pick like these pixels or 3D pixels, and we behind the scenes compute these design options. So based on their budget, like the users pick like 3 pixels or 6 pixels or 3 corner pixels and half pixels on the outside and so on, and we compute these spatial modules and combinations. And this is enabled by a system of combinatorial possibilities. Like, so we designed and tested how these kit parts can be combined to create interest and variety. So it's not all cookie cutter the same, but at the same time, it can benefit from economies of scale, similar to other modular construction. So it has the benefits of customization and the benefits of modularization. And so the other benefit of this kind of configurator was that like we designed so many types, and but most users only chose like 2 types. So this then meant that it became a kind of testing ground for like which ones to take forward and detail further, which is what we did after this phase. When we did the configuration with about 16 buyers early on, we realized that we only need to detail further 2 more. And then we detail the kit of parts accordingly further to make sure those 2 types are delivered. And we also then detailed it to know how each of those parts can be converted from raw material to finished product, how much time it takes, how much machine time it takes, how much material resource it takes, and how it can be connected deeply with the kind of technologies of Circular Factory and the skilled labor that they were training. And so this kind of system integration also delivers a lot of economies in terms of like usually modular buildings are designed as individual units and then stacked together. So there's a lot of redundancy and a lot of wastage. And because here we already know who the buyers are going to be and what arrangement they want, we can now treat the entire aggregate as one building. So we can then optimize the structure and the material consumption and energy consumption as one holistic building rather than as 16 individual buildings stacked on top of each other. So this is where we are at. Like we want to kind of demonstrate this pilot cluster. Hopefully there's enough buyers and funding, and if we do, then we can then export this to other parts of the world, where we can then customize it to local climate and local other opportunities, material opportunities and skill opportunities and so on. So we took this idea and then also extended it into a kind of fun game for Fortnite, like last year, whereby like we tried this idea of configuration real time with like kids as young as 7 years old. So all of what is being built on screen was built by players as young as 7 and sometimes as old as 18, but within 3 to 5 minutes of playing, they can create these architecturally credible outcomes and at the same time learn about the trade-offs involved in city building and so on. And so all of these outcomes are designed by like kids, and collaboratively, it's a 3 to 4 player game where they have to harmonize some resources while they're building. And what was quite revealing was that like, you know, we could watch from behind the scenes and see like all of these players building amazing number of combinations in 3 to 4 minutes. And at peak, there were about, in the first week, there were about 500,000 kids playing this game, which for a first architectural game in Fortnite, it was pretty revealing for us and rewarding to see. So that's where we are now thinking that we can use this game as a kind of reinforcement learning environment, whereby an agent plays the game like Monopoly and figures out what is a win-win situation for both the city and the citizen. And then in the process, the agent might be able to explore many combinations and then also translate those combinations into corresponding architectural outcomes. Therefore, also giving a look and feel to each one of these kind of resource outcomes. So yeah, like I'll leave you with this like kind of handcrafted simulation of like how such ideas of consensus building can be extended to the scale of a city. Here is 4 players playing a game of how to build out like the entire city, a bit like SimCity, but for real. With more realistic constraints, more realistic architectural ideas, and construction costs, and so on. So I hope like that kind of really gives a sense of like the digital side of building for consensus and designing for consensus, and the opportunities that are at stake here. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Ajay. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If you have a question, let me know. You can come up and ask here. Yep. You want to come up here? Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. I heard you mention the role of venture capital in architecture. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit more. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, historically, like in the innovation has been sustained like through building projects and city building projects. There's not been like, like in the tech industry, separate ways to fund innovation. There has been private capital, of course, like in Amsterdam and even Florence and Venice. They were all built through bankers who invested in the early development and as a return got some equity within quotes in the city. So they got like pieces of land along the canal, or like because they funded the development of the canal or some things like that. So this idea, and also New York, like air rights, they were auctioned off, like, and occupation rights were auctioned off to fund a lot of the early development of New York. So that kind of combination between design that is compatible with rapid construction and therefore like de-risking some of the investments for these capital players is what I mean by like the role of venture capital in the built environment is slightly different to the role that it plays in the technology industry.
Hi, Alicia and Shahai. I'm Changuito from Nick State, and I would like to ask you about how are you working with the new vision about the new model of governance or take decision in relation with the nature. We are kind of try to work in the regenerative model versus extractivist model, and we really trust in the future is the good relation between the nature, the technology, and the conscientious people. So which are your main key point, strategy, or element that you are working with the Zaha Hadid to work on that, and how the architecture can be helping on these kind of new models, no? Thank you.
Alicia, do you want to respond first with the kind of things that you're doing with the social innovation side of things?
Yeah, I think that for us, like definitely like the main parameters for the design of the microfactory and even the cabins and every project that we are doing is how can we like leverage technology to not like just like to upskill people, to train people, but also to like engage with like localized materials. Like I think that that's very important, like localized supply chains that maybe are not like as precise or as perfect as our internationally established ones, but also are more resilient to like trade problems and to this kind of like global issues, right? So I think that the fact that I mean, and something for us really that has been really central to the developing of the circular factory and the software platform and all the production processes behind it are the engaging with the locals, with the local trades, with the local materials, with the local requirements, not only from the governance perspective, but also from who is going to be producing the final items. I think that that's why like we really we kind of really put a lot of like right now we have 22 people, like a lot of effort in like the training, but also in making the platform as transparent as possible. I think that one of the issues on construction processes is that even when you're working with local trades, it's a lack of transparency. You never know how long things will take, how much material they will need. It's always a little bit of like a guess, and like I mean, and you have to trust your contractor, and then you don't know what will happen. So and then there are always delays and these kind of things. So it's kind of really trying to engage in a holistic way with those ecosystems, both bringing technology to bring transparency, to bring clarity, so that you can, at any point, you can see, okay, these pieces are taking longer. Why? Because maybe there was a mistake. Where was the error? Was it in the code? Was it in the machine? Was it in the people? Maybe not enough people came to work that day. So really trying to use technology to leverage that transparency, and also like I was showing on the machine learning to like understand how materials perform like physically, so that we can set our pieces in a more efficient way, but based on whatever the material happens to be. So that has been like, I think that holistic engagement with all the different parts of the production cycle, from the design to the final production, but really with flexibility and kind of engaging with local skills, local trades, and local materials, has been at the core of how I see these technological solutions being able to evolve and to be fundamental to new cities, that we would not want to just import everything or bring everything from other places, right? You want to bring benefits to the local economies also.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat similar for our side as well, that, the way we design the first part of being sustainable is to be digital. And the first part of being circular is to be digital. Like, so, because once you digitalize process, not only digitize, but truly digitalize, like digitally native design conception, digitally native participatory mechanisms, or internet native design systems, and so on, that really is the community that we are trying to aim for, like the next generation of designers, next generation of consumers, next generation of community creators, and so on, that are going to be digitally native. And so that would be that. So we're looking, 3 to 5 years into the future, and hope that these city building efforts like Edge Patagonia, or many other, like we were also in Switzerland in the summer. Hope that like these kind of efforts are collectively bear fruit. Yeah.
Hello. I have a question. I think it's mostly for Alicia. You spoke a lot about like creating like micro factories on site, where these kind of like cities are being developed. And I think that's a great idea, but I was wondering if you could share a little bit of what you can about like the cost structure today of doing something in a place with this approach, as opposed to basically bringing something far away, let's say from China, and how that cost structure is today, and how you forecast it to be into the future as, I guess, these processes get improved.
Yeah, thanks for that. So one of the advantages, for example, one of the things that we have, not advantages, but we have discovered through like the circular factory, because it was, because the factory, I mean, right now we have electricity, but at the beginning we didn't. I mean, we were running off a generator, right? So basically we have really been dealing with all the issues of setting on a remote place where maybe you are not having the normal things that you will be able to have in a city, right? Like electricity, like roads that are reliable, like established supplies. Like for us to be on an island also, it means that whatever you want to bring, it has to come from Miami or from the USA, and you have to wait at least 2 weeks to get anything, because it's not like you go to the Home Depot or anything like that. It doesn't exist. So we have really built that resilience, and a lot of that in the platform right now. And that's something that we have been like learning through the last like 3 years in Circular Factories operational, is to kind of all of those models of how can we survive, or how can you have a manufacturing facility in a faraway place, because it's definitely not the same as having a manufacturing facility even near a city. So those are some of the learnings that we have really bang our head against the wall, but now I think we have incorporate as much of those learnings into our system. I think that some of the big advantages that we see is that it's basically the benefits to local economies, is the fact that if you bring something from China, first, something that is not really considered in the cost of the sustainability is freight. So now you're having to bring houses with timber that maybe is not even from China, maybe it's from somewhere else, was on there, now it's coming all the way. So there is a lot of costs in transport, and especially when you are like in a remote location, then there is also like, for example, it has to come to the Pacific coast of Honduras from China, then it has to cross everything through land, and it has to take another boat, get to Ratan. So all of those shipping costs and freight, not only in carbon footprint, but actually in the cost of all of that, start to really accumulate. And so we kind of see the benefits on not having to rely on that, but also bringing expertise. I think especially in questions like Latin America, where like we know that a lot of people want to immigrate, at least from Honduras to the US. So how can we bring them opportunities and digitize them and make them, now they can Now they are carpenters that know how to use robots, know how to use CNC machines, have a higher entry point, potentially a better future. So I think that those will be like some of the bigger things. Also the lumber, right? All the lumber we use is local. When we talk to other, like here in Canada, they're trying to set up another factory using Canadian lumber. It's very different set of constraints, but actually the benefits go beyond just the factory. They do spread to the economy where the factory is located. When you import things from like large factories, we know that that's not the case. There's no any transmission of skills, transmission of knowledge, and also there is also less flexibility. Like in our case, the circular factory, we have done louvers, we have also done now the cabins. We have also we really try to be very flexible to different projects. So flexibility and customization, like Shaya mentioned with Beabu, being able to adapt to customization as fast as really in a fast loop. I think that those are the main benefits that I really see, and I really think that, or I see a future where like growing these cities benefit the places where they are growing.
Okay, thank you. We have another session coming in, so we'll have to end here. Thank you so much for joining, and have a good day.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sean.
Hope to see you
Thanks a
all
lot,
in
everyone.
person at some point.